Hi there! Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making a small little knitted pumpkin. Have you ever wanted to make a little pumpkin like this on your circular knitting machine? That's what today's video is all about. I'm going to show you how to make this pumpkin, and I'm using my Addi Professional King size, but if you have a Sentro or any other brand that has similar needle count, mine's 46 needles. If you have a 48 Sentro or anything similar to that, the results will pretty much be the same. It'll be slightly different size, but the process is still the same. If you'd like to follow along with a written pattern, you can visit my Etsy shop, which I'll link that down below, and that gives you written instructions on how to make 4 different sizes: a small, medium, large, and extra large. Today we're going to be making a large size. This is about 6 inches wide, and it stands about 3 inches tall. That's the size, and basically the only difference is how many rows you do with your machine. The process is pretty much the same for either size. So grab all your supplies, go grab my pattern if you want to follow along with the written instructions, and let's go make a pumpkin. I'll take you down to my machine. Okay, so the supplies needed to make this pumpkin are going to be some yarn, and I've used Lion brand Respun. It is a category 4 weight, worsted weight yarn, and it actually works really good in my Addi machine. And then you'll need a tapestry needle for casting off, and also for making the different humps in the pumpkin, and a set of scissors. And you don't need any waste yarn for this particular pattern, so I'm gonna show you how I cast on and how to make this pumpkin real quick. Okay, so when I use a skein of yarn like this Lion brand homespun, I like to do a center pull. I don't necessarily wind my skeins into a cake unless I find that it tangles really easily. I might make it into a, but I've used quite a few of these respun things, and they seem to flow really well. Okay, so when we start our cast on, always make sure that your yarn. Okay, when we go to cast on, we're going to leave a nice long tail, probably about 3 or 4 feet, 36, 48 inches, and we're going to start on needle 1 here. On my machine, I've marked the hump right before my first needle black. It's just a lot easier to follow it around and know when you're getting to your last stitch. So to start the cast on, we're going to basically be going on every other needle. So we'll start with the first needle, then we'll go to the 3rd, and then to the 5th. So behind and in front, behind and in front. And when I talk and try to do this, it's it's like chewing bubble gum and rubbing the top of your head. I find it really hard to do. So let's okay, so on the last needle here, which for me it's number 46, we're just going to wrap that around the back side of the needle and feed it through the yarn gauge, or the yarn guide. And you know, I see some people feed their yarn through the top. I personally like to feed it down through the bottom, and then that way I can hold it. I know you can't see it through in the camera view here, but let's see. So I will usually hold my yarn just a couple inches away from the yarn guide so I can hold tension on it. So now we're going to start cranking. And I always want to pull this first stitch tight to make sure it doesn't come off of those red loops, or the little red fingers that are right there. And we're just going to crank real slow. Make sure that everything catches and goes smoothly. Sometimes if you have these wrapped too tight, you'll split your yarn see how this white needle is going down here, right here on this stitch. Sometimes if you have it wrapped too tight, it will split that. So I try not to hold too tight of a tension when I do that first initial cast on. So now right before I get to my first needle, I will reset my counter to 0 so I can count. So now we're going to, this will be my first row right here. So this is row 1. And after you get those first couple rows done, it's pretty easy to go fast. So once I get started like that, then I have actually bought the little attachment that I can put on my drill or screwdriver. Some people use a screwdriver. My husband had this drill, so he let me borrow it. And we'll just crank out. For the large pumpkin, I'm going to do 80 rows. So I will see you when I get to the end. Okay, so as I'm getting close to the end of my 80th row, I always usually kind of stop and manually do the last couple of stitches. So now right here, I'm going to cut my yarn and get ready to cast off, but I want to leave myself a nice long tail of probably about 36 inches, so that will help me cast off as well as use it to weave in the bumps on the pumpkin. So what you'll do is undo your yarn guide, pull your yarn out, and we want to make sure that it actually gets knitted by the last needle. Always make sure you close your yarn guide. So that needle has gone down. Now thread your tapestry needle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank out probably about 10 stitches or so. So here's where we ended. Then you're going to take your tapestry needle for the cast off, and we're going to pick up each one of those stitches with our tapestry needle. And the first like 3 or 4 stitches, you want to make sure that you just do one at a time. And sometimes you have to be careful because the next stitch might pop off, so sometimes I'll sit there and hold my next stitch. And now, that's the problem with the long tail, sometimes it gets caught on stuff. So now that I've done about 4 or 5 stitches, I should be able to go and pick up a few stitches at a time until I get down here to this last stitch. Then crank out a few more stitches, and now here we can pick up multiple stitches at a time. Makes it a lot quicker. Just got to be careful that you don't have any of these loops slide off your needle, because then you'll get a drop stitch and we don't want that. So this last stitch here. I like to use these tapestry needles that are curved at the tip. Makes it really easy to go in and pick up that loop off of the, it goes in right in between those 2 little prongs there, and it just really easily picks up that loop. See if I can zoom in a little bit more. See where that needle just goes right in between those 2 prongs and picks up that loop. So that's all of the stitches. Now what we're going to do is bring it up and give it a nice tug. Get all those stitches straightened out. Then you'll want to pull it side to side as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cinch both ends together. So we'll cinch this end together. I'm going to, this is the cast off yarn that I just did. I'm going to feed the needle through the middle there. And then I'm going to reach up inside and grab that needle. And I'm also going to grab, see my hand is inside there, I'm going to grab that opening and kind of fold it in half, almost just like you're making a beanie if you've made a beanie before, but if not, then, so I'm going to pull this thread or this yarn all the way through and just kind of get this cinched up nice and tight. I snagged some of my yarn there, and I'm going to pull the outside yarn, which is, this is the cast on edge. We're going to pull that nice and tight. Sometimes that likes to curl out like that, so you have to work it and make sure that it stays together, or stays down inside there. So then once I get them all cinched nice and tight, then I'll tie a couple of knots here. Get that so it's looking pretty good. And we'll do 3 times a charm, third knot there. If I'm doing a beanie, a lot of times I'll even go 4 knots. Okay, so now we have kind of our little beanie. Then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take another piece of yarn and we're going to weave it in and out along this fold here to get ready to cinch that closed, and that will be our pumpkin. So let me grab another piece of yarn. Okay, so I'm just going to thread, and I don't know if you've probably seen videos before, but I don't ever thread my needles like this. I always fold it in half, get a nice squished part there, and very easy to thread your needle that way. So we're going to take this edge here, just find a point to go in, and it's not real important to go every other stitch. I've seen some videos where if you're making like an animal or something, it probably is a little bit more essential. So we're just going to kind of make a drawstring here. So I'm just going to go in every few stitches, weave it in and out. And then we're going to stuff this thing with polyfill. And I think I forgot to tell you at the beginning of the video that that's one of the supplies you need, is some polyfill or some sort of craft polyester doll or toy stuffing. I've even heard a little bit more inexpensive way to use stuffing is if you buy like a poly-filled pillow. You can sometimes find those at bargain stores and use that. I haven't tried that yet, but that's a good idea. Once I run out of my supply of polyfill, that might be something that I look to do. Okay, so we're at the end here. So I'm just gonna, basically we're gonna fill this whole thing with polyfill, and you wanna get it fairly stuffed so it looks like a big ball. You'd be surprised at how much polyfill you can put in one of these. And this, I'll probably need more than this, but I'd like to break it apart so it's not one big clump. I'm just going to start stuffing it in there. that's looking pretty good there. I'll cinch this a little bit tighter here. That's looking like it might look like a good pumpkin. Put just a little bit more in. Okay, so we're just going to get this tied shut. Well, I think I might put a little bit more in there. It's not quite as firm as I'd like it to be. And that's personal preference. Don't want it to be super squishy. So okay. So see how it kind of looks like a ball? When we start wrapping this around and making it look like a pumpkin, it will flatten out a little bit more, but I will try to squish it down and get a little bit flatter so it looks more pumpkinish rather than a ball. So now I'm going to leave these long tails from my drawstring here just in case, and I'll show you why. So the tails that we used for, or that we left long for the cast on and the cast off, I'm going to thread one of those with my needle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces of yarn and we're going to basically section this off. And I like to do it kind of like a pie. So if you divide this circle, divide it in half, then divide it in half, and then divide it in half again. And that gives you kind of 8 little sections to make it look like a pumpkin. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick it right down through the middle here. And then we're basically going to feed it through the hole in the bottom here. So you kind of have to feel your way. But got it coming through there. Then I'm just going to pick an area, probably just go straight out. And I like to try to run it right down. See, I'm running it right along a row of stitches there. Then I'm going to feed it back through again. One more time. Come out the bottom. Okay. Then I guess I'll make sure that it's still lined up on that row there. And we're just going to pull that nice and tight. See how that brings it down into a little pumpkin hump there? So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go directly across to the other side. And get all tangled up in all my long tails here. Okay, so then I'm just going to go basically straight across from that one. Back down through the middle again. And pull that one tight. Then we're gonna, I'll go this way.
And come around straight across from that.
Okay. See how my tail is starting to get short now. I probably have enough to do one more wrap, and then I'll switch to my next tail. So now that I've got it into halves, or quarters I guess, now I'm going to start going this way at an angle. It's starting to look pretty good. It's starting to look more like a pumpkin than it is a little ball. Okay, so now I don't have enough to do one more wrap, so I'm gonna grab one of my other tails and just tie this off. A couple knots there so it doesn't come undone. Okay, and we'll weave those all in later. And depending on what yarn you use, it's always a good idea to have an extra long tail there, because I've made some pumpkins before where I pulled really tight and then my yarn broke, and that was kind of a bummer because then I had to go find some more yarn to weave through. So it's always nice to have a little bit of extra, even though it's kind of a pain because it gets in the way. See, that's looking pretty darn good. Okay, so same thing here. I'm just going to grab another one of these tails and tie that off to a nice knot. Okay, now if you're concerned about that little opening down there, you could always weave your needle through there a couple of times. This is going to be the bottom of my pumpkin, so I'm not too concerned about it, but you should be able to weave your, just cinch it closed a little bit more and tie it off. Okay, oops. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'll trim these a little bit shorter. I'm gonna take all of these tails from the bottom, and I should be able to fit them all on my one needle. And I'm just gonna go back down through my hole and pop out the side somewhere to weave those tails in. Trim those off. Okay, now you have a bunch of different options you can do for the stem. What I like to do is put a little leather tab as the stem. That one's kind of small. Let's see. Here we go. Little leather tab like that makes the stem. If you have a leather hole punch, punch a hole in that bad boy. You could always crochet a stem. I've seen some cute curly Q ones on Pinterest and stuff. It's basically kind of whatever. I've also seen people put like a cinnamon stick in there, or even like a little twig as a stem. So the options are pretty wide open there, depending on what you want to do. So I'll just take my tail here and run that down through the bottom. And that will tighten this. That will tighten this right on down, just like that. That's a baby little stem, but I like it. Okay, and then probably tie this. Make a knot there just so it doesn't come undone. and then weave this bad boy through one of the sides there. And that, my friends, is how you make a pumpkin on the Addi knitting machine. Or you could use your Sentro, and if you have like a 48 needle, then this would probably be slightly bigger because it has a few more stitches. Or if you make it on the smaller machines, then it would be obviously probably a little bit shorter. Also, just wanted to show you what the size of the pumpkin is. So from side to side, it measures about 6 inches. And then as far as height wise, it's about 3 inches tall. So 6 inches by about 3 inches. But thanks for watching, and stay tuned to my channel for some more videos on some projects that you can make with your circular knitting machines. Thanks so much.